At their 41st anniversary, my SIL launched a theft accusation until my laugh and the swift arrival of the restaurant owner turned the tables. That night, at my parents' 41st anniversary, my sister-in-law called me a filthy thief in front of our entire family. She thought she had me cornered, but the moment she saw me laugh, I knew her entire plan was about to spectacularly unravel, and the truth, for the first time in years, was finally going to set me free. My gut still clenches when I recall that night, but the satisfaction? That feeling is absolutely priceless. You see, to truly understand what happened, you need to understand Belle. She swaggered into our family 7 years ago when my brother, Nathan, brought her home. From day one, she was on a never-ending quest to be the queen bee. She came from money. Her dad ran a chain of premium car dealerships, a fact she'd never let you forget. I tried, I really did. I wanted Nathan to be happy, and if Belle was his choice, I was determined to make it work. I invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, even offered to help plan their wedding. But every single time, Belle found a subtle, sneaky way to chip away at me. She'd scoff at my basic flat, ask if my clothes were from a bargain bin, or dismiss my graphic design work as adorable, but not as significant as her job or her father's empire. It was exhausting. Her most vicious attacks always came out at family gatherings. I still remember 4 Christmases ago when she accidentally spilled red wine all over a dress I had spent weeks designing and sewing myself. Then, the Thanksgiving before last, she publicly declared how brave I was to come to dinner alone again, painting me as some miserable spinster. At my niece Mia's baptism, she had the audacity to tell her extended family that my baby gift was kind, given your financial situation. Each time I swallowed it, I smiled through tight teeth. Not for her, never for her, but for Nathan, who seemed completely oblivious to his wife's actions. And for my beautiful niece Mia. She was so innocent, so lovely, and the thought of causing turmoil that might hurt her kept me silent for years. My parents, Richard and Elaine, now in their early 70s, are classic peacekeepers. They believe family unity is worth almost any cost. My dad was a high school principal for 33 years, my mom a nurse. They instilled in us values of forgiveness and treasured family relationships. When Belle's antics became too blatant, they'd just change the subject or try to separate us. It was frustrating, but I understood their nature. Nathan, my older brother by 3 years, was often caught in the middle. We were so close growing up. He defended me from bullies, taught me to ride a bike, and was my confidant through adolescence. But after Belle, he changed. He grew distant, canceling our weekly sibling dinners, inventing excuses. When I gently tried to bring up Belle's treatment, he'd get defensive, accusing me of envy or being oversensitive. She just has a distinct communication style, Tess, he'd say. You need to try harder to understand her. My own brother dismissed my feelings. That hurt deeply. My younger sister, Holly, was my only true ally. 2 years my junior. Holly was the family's rebel, speaking her mind no matter the consequences. She saw right through Belle and didn't hesitate to call her out, making her Belle's second favorite target. To be honest, Holly was far less bothered by Belle's jabs than I was. Do you know what your problem is? Holly once told me, rolling her eyes, you still care what the witch thinks. Stop giving her power. Easier said than done when every family gathering felt like a psychological battleground. The preparations for that infamous night began 4 months ago. My parents announced their 41st anniversary, a huge milestone that deserved something spectacular. I offered to plan a dinner at Salvatore, their favorite Italian restaurant, where they had their first date. I poured my heart into it. Custom menus, a playlist of their favorite songs, inviting their oldest friends, creating a presentation of family photos, and even designing stunning custom invitations. Naturally, Belle had to interject herself. First, she called the restaurant behind my back to reschedule our reservation time. Then, she called my invited guests and suggested an alternative, far more formal dress code. She even purchased a completely different cake than the one I had painstakingly chosen based on my parents' preferred tastes, saying hers was more sophisticated. When I confronted her, she played innocent. "Oh, I thought we were planning this together." Nathan chimed in, "You probably needed help since you have so little experience with this kind of upscale event." He later denied saying that, but he also refused to tell Belle to back off. So I adjusted. I compromised. I just focused on making the evening perfect for my parents. By the time the day arrived, I was drained from her interference, but I was determined not to let her spoil it. Salvatore was a quaint, old-school restaurant nestled in Chicago's Little Italy. Marco, the owner's son, had helped me reserve their most romantic corner, a private dining space, and even agreed to recreate their first date meal. The room glowed with warm amber light. Red and white flowers adorned each table. I arrived 90 minutes early to personally arrange framed photos of my parents throughout their marriage on a remembrance table, along with the hand-illustrated family tree I had spent months creating as an anniversary gift. By 6:30, guests began to arrive. My parents walked into cheers, my mother elegant in a blue dress, my father beaming with pride. The smiles on their faces made all the tension worthwhile until Belle arrived. She and Nathan were 20 minutes late because Belle insisted on changing clothes 4 times, as I later found out. She swept in wearing a crimson couture gown that was way too formal, diamonds sparkling everywhere. Mia trailed behind her, in a smaller, uncomfortable imitation of her mother's dress. Belle apologized profusely for being late, air-kissing my mother. Traffic was just terrible, and I simply had to make sure we looked decent. "Some of us recognize the significance of presenting well at important occasions," she said, her gaze pointedly shifting to my plain black cocktail dress, which I had chosen specifically to not upstage my mother. Mom frowned slightly, but as usual, just thanked Belle and complimented Mia. The seating had been meticulously planned. My parents in the center, surrounded by their oldest friends, Nathan, Belle, and Mia at one end, Holly and I at the other. This was meant to keep Belle and me at a safe distance. But Belle had other intentions. As everyone took their seats, she announced, "Oh, there must be a mistake. As the eldest son's wife, I should be sitting next to Elaine. On such a significant event. Family should be near, don't you think?" Before I could respond, Mom, bless her heart, changed the place cards, displacing her best friend Diane, who had flown in from Arizona for the occasion. The ripple effect caused several other guests to shuffle, creating confusion and uncomfortable stares. I caught Holly's eye across the table. She subtly shook her head, silently urging me not to cause a scene. During appetizers, Belle dominated the conversation, focusing primarily on her accomplishments. She'd recently been promoted to marketing director at her father's firm, a job everyone knew was created specifically for her and had no real responsibilities. "It's just so satisfying to be rewarded for hard work," she added, looking directly at me. "Not everyone understands the dedication required to thrive in the business world. Some people choose easier, more creative paths, which is great, I suppose. My father, ever the diplomat, tried to include me. Tessa just finished a huge branding project for a new tech company. What was its name again, sweetheart?" Before I could answer, Belle interjected. "Oh, Richard, speaking of technology, have I told you about the new partnership I've brokered with Tesla? Daddy says it's the biggest deal our company has ever made." This pattern persisted all evening. Belle interrupting, diverting, and subtly undermining everyone, especially me. I focused on ensuring the service ran smoothly, quietly coordinating with the waitstaff. As I returned to my seat after talking to the head waiter, I noticed something peculiar. Belle had briefly left the table, claiming she needed to freshen up. As she returned, I saw her reach inside her enormous luxury handbag and carefully place something into an interior pocket. From my vantage point, it looked like a second wallet, distinct from the red leather designer wallet I'd seen her use earlier. My initial thought was she'd found an old wallet, but the furtive manner she glanced around as she did it raised a red flag. Belle's body language, when she was planning something wicked, had become glaringly obvious to me over the years. She had a tell, a slight tightening of her eyes, a calculating expression. I saw that face now, and it sent shivers down my spine. For a brief moment, I considered confronting her, but several things held me back. This was my parents' special night, and they'd had enough of our arguments. Without knowing exactly what she was up to, any accusation would sound crazy and petty. And perhaps most importantly, a small voice inside me said that sometimes the best way to deal with a trap is to let it spring on its own terms. So, I watched and waited, maintaining a polite facade as my mind raced. Belle returned to her seat and placed her large purse on the floor between her chair and mine. Despite the table having a perfectly decent hook underneath it, the bag was conspicuously within reach of my chair. Another detail that seemed purposefully orchestrated. Throughout the main course, I chatted cheerfully with the other guests, all while keeping a discreet eye on Belle's bag. I noticed her checking it multiple times, ostensibly for her phone or a tissue, but always with that calculating look. Whatever game she was playing, she was setting the stage with precision, and for the first time in our long history of conflict, I felt one step ahead of her. The tension in the private dining area was palpable. What should have been a celebration of love felt like a conversational minefield. Elegant platters of osso buco and homemade pasta receded into the background. Uncle Frank, my father's brother, who never quite mastered reading a room, brought up the family cabin in Michigan. "So, Richard," he boomed, "have you decided who gets the cabin in the will?" Not to seem morbid, but I was just discussing inheritance planning with my financial advisor. A deep quiet descended. Nathan, Holly, and I had countless cherished memories from that cabin, a 3 generations old retreat. It was also a subject of contention because Belle had often stated her intention to renovate it into a true lake house and effectively claim it as her own. "We haven't made any final decisions," my father said cautiously, clearly uncomfortable. "That's not really dinner conversation, Frank." But Belle saw an opening. "Oh, since it came up, Nathan and I have actually been brainstorming some fantastic ideas for renovating the cabin. It needs extensive improvements, and we'd be happy to invest in them provided, well, you know." She smiled sweetly. "It would be such a special environment for Mia to grow up in, just like Nathan did." The implication was painfully clear. The cabin should be theirs because they had a child. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that always emerged whenever Belle used her position as the mother of the only grandchild to gain an advantage. "The cabin is perfect as it is," I responded, trying to keep my voice light. "The whole point is the rustic charm and family heritage. Modernizing it would strip away what makes it unique." Belle's eyes narrowed slightly. That's a common response from someone who is reluctant to constructive change. "The cottage has plumbing from the 1970s, Tessa. Surely even you can agree that something has to be updated." "There's a difference," I countered, "between necessary renovations and entirely destroying the essence of a place." My mother, seeing the impending storm, quickly shifted the conversation to Holly's recent promotion. But Belle wasn't finished. "Speaking about careers," she interjected after Holly had spoken for a mere 45 seconds. "I've heard that graphic design positions are being swiftly displaced by artificial intelligence. Tessa, are you concerned? It must be quite stressful to work in a declining field." All eyes went to me. Classic Belle, a topic designed to put me on the defensive. "Actually," I responded, maintaining a relaxed grin, "human ingenuity and knowledge of emotional resonance are things AI can't mimic. My client list is growing as companies realize that connection. But I appreciate your concern for my job." The discourse alternated between happy reminiscences and Belle's stinging remarks. By the time dessert was served, I was emotionally exhausted from the constant vigilance required to deflect her attacks. "Excuse me for a moment," I murmured, getting up. "I need to check with the kitchen about the anniversary cake." In reality, All I wanted was a break from Belle's calculating gaze and subtle digs. I stepped out onto the restaurant's small outdoor terrace. I took a deep breath, leaning on the stone balustrade, gazing up at the few stars visible through Chicago's light pollution. In that quiet moment, I considered my options. I could continue the pattern of the last 7 years, parrying her attacks. I could escalate, finally calling her out publicly. Or I could find a middle ground that preserved my dignity without completely ruining my parents' celebration. As I stood there pondering, I remembered the peculiar behavior with the second wallet. Whatever she had planned, it was surely coming tonight. The thought sent a chill down my spine. After about 7 minutes, I knew I needed to return. As I walked back, I noticed Marco, the owner, talking to a server, gesturing towards our private room. He met my gaze and gave me a brief, comforting nod. During the planning, I had confided in him about some of the family dynamics, and he had pledged to help ensure the evening ran smoothly. That small show of solidarity bolstered my resolve. When I returned, dessert was being served, a beautiful tiramisu. As soon as I took my seat, I sensed a change. Belle sat up straighter, an almost imperceptible smile flickering on her lips. Nathan seemed nervous, picking at his dessert. My father was mid-story about their honeymoon, but Belle was barely paying attention, her gaze flitting between me and her bag, which was still positioned between our chairs. I had barely finished my first mouthful of tiramisu when Belle let out a sudden, piercing shriek, cutting off my father mid-sentence. "My wallet!" she cried, bringing her palm to her chest in an exaggerated display of distress. "I can't find my wallet." The conversation died. Everyone turned to Belle, who was now making a show of rummaging through her bags. "Are you sure you brought it?" my mother asked, alarmed. "Have you checked your coat?" "Of course I brought it." Belle snapped, quickly adjusting her expression to one of frantic anxiety. "I had it right here. I used it to pay the coat check. Someone must have taken it." She began searching wildly, looking under the table, asking others to check near their seats. I noticed she carefully kept everyone's attention away from her own purse, where I was certain the missing wallet was still safely tucked. Diane suggested, "Maybe you left it in the restroom?" No. Belle insisted, her voice rising sharply. "It was right inside my bag. It has all my credit cards, my driver's license, and even irreplaceable photos of Mia." As the search widened and guests began to stand, I noticed Belle's eyes dart toward me multiple times, gauging my reaction. Even as I felt the trap closing in, I maintained a neutral demeanor, even helping to look around. "Wait," Belle interrupted abruptly, her voice lowering to a dramatic hush. "Tessa, when did you leave the table earlier and where did you go?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Several people looked puzzled, not fully grasping the implication. But I knew exactly what she was trying to do. "I walked to the terrace for some fresh air." I responded evenly and then spoke to Marco about the cake. "Why are you asking?" Belle's eyes sharpened, and I could see she was pleased that I had walked right into her script. "Isn't it funny," she asked slowly, "that my wallet disappears just as you leave the table? And you were gone for a long time, weren't you?" The mood in the room shifted instantly. I could feel the uneasy tension as people realized what Belle was implying. My mother looked shocked, my father perplexed and disturbed. Holly was almost out of her seat, rage on her face. But I caught her eye and gently shook my head. This was between Belle and me. "Are you insinuating that I snatched your wallet?" I asked, my voice steady. "That's a serious accusation, Belle." She didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned to the entire table and declared, "Has anyone seen my wallet? It's a red leather Prada with a gold clasp. Really unique and definitely costly." No one had, of course, as I was more convinced than ever it was exactly where Belle had hidden it, waiting for her theatrical unveiling. The private dining area at Salvatore became utterly silent. The wait staff, sensing the tension, had discreetly retreated. Even the gentle Italian music seemed to have faded. Belle rose slowly, her chair scraping across the wooden floor, piercing the quiet like a knife. Every eye in the room was on her as she stood to her full height, her countenance shifting from troubled search to righteous indignation. "You!" she continued, pointing straight at me, raising her voice to a near yell. "You stole my wallet, you filthy thief!" No one responded for a moment as the accusation lingered in the air, so terrible and unexpected. My father was the first to recover. "Now, Belle," he said, his principal's authoritative voice making an unexpected appearance. "That is a very serious allegation to make without any evidence." But Belle was undeterred. She was fully committed to her performance. Her cheeks flushed with what looked like genuine outrage. "I have suspected for years that things go missing when Tessa is around," she spat. A set of earrings from the guest bathroom, money from Nathan's wallet, Mia's birthday gift card from last year. I never said anything because I wanted to maintain the peace, but this is too much. I felt like I'd been physically hit. Not only was she accusing me of taking her wallet tonight, but she was blaming me for other purported crimes that I had never even heard of until this very moment. I looked at Nathan, expecting him to defend me, but he was looking at the tablecloth, his expression inscrutable. "That is absolutely not true," I countered, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I have never taken anything that did not belong to me. Not tonight, not ever." My denial seemed to fuel Belle's performance. She turned to face the table, her look now one of sorrowful vindication. "Do you see how she lies? Always so sweet and innocent. Tessa, the graphic designer. Tessa, the loving daughter. Tessa, whom everyone adores. But I know what she truly is." The guests shifted uneasily. Some looked confused, others ashamed. My mother had tears in her eyes, and my father looked older than I had ever seen him, the lines on his face deepening with distress. I felt a kaleidoscope of emotions. Humiliation consumed me. Anger surged through my temples at the blatant unfairness. But underneath those quick impulses, a strange calm was emerging. I knew what was coming. I'd seen the setup, recognized the trap, and though a part of me wanted to leap to my feet and scream the truth, another, stronger part advised patience. Let her play her hand completely. "I do not appreciate being called a thief or a liar," I remarked quietly, especially at our parents' anniversary party. Belle's eyes gleamed with triumph at what she plainly saw as a weak resistance. And then she made the move I'd been waiting for. "Well, if you're so innocent," she sneered, "you won't mind if we check your things." Before I could react, she reached down to my feet where my small clutch purse was sitting alongside my chair. I had purposefully chosen a tiny evening bag that could only hold my phone, lipstick, and keys, to avoid bringing anything superfluous. "That's hardly big enough to hide a wallet," Holly pointed out forcefully. "No," Belle agreed, straightening up with a predatory smile. "But this is." She grabbed for the enormous tote bag that had been resting between our chairs, which I knew belonged to her, but she now claimed was mine. "That's not my bag," I said gently. "Oh." Belle lifted a finely sculpted brow. "Then whose is it? It's been sitting right beside you all evening." Before I could react, she unzipped the tote bag and dramatically reached inside, even though I had expected this. The delight on her face as her palm wrapped around what she was looking for made my stomach churn. "Well, well, well," she announced, her voice full of feigned astonishment, as she triumphantly pulled out her red Prada wallet. "What do we have here?" "My wallet. In your bag. See, I knew it was you." The collective gasp from across the table was audible. My mother clutched her lips, her eyes wide with horror. My father looked distraught, torn between his desire to believe his daughter and the seemingly incontrovertible evidence. "Tessa," Nathan finally said, his voice full of perplexity and regret. "How could you?" That stung more than anything else. The swift assumption of my guilt by my own brother. Belle's influence had corroded his trust in me to the point that he didn't even question this preposterous scenario. Belle's eyes shone with satisfaction as she surveyed the horrified expressions. She had perfectly orchestrated her moment, creating a scene where I appeared indisputably guilty. In her eyes, she had finally triumphed, humiliating me so thoroughly that I would never recover. What she hadn't counted on was that I had predicted it from the outset. The stunned silence that followed Belle's theatrical revelation seemed to last an eternity. My relatives and friends looked at the crimson wallet in her palm, then at me. Their expressions were a painful mix of perplexity, disappointment, and unease. The perfect anniversary party had gone horribly wrong, and I was suddenly the undeniable villain of the evening. And then I did something unexpected. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle and quickly escalated into full-fledged, genuine laughter that I couldn't stop. The sheer absurdity of the situation, Belle's elaborate trap, and her conviction that she had finally outmaneuvered me. It all just struck me as ridiculously funny. In that moment of intense tension, my laughter shattered the stillness. Belle's triumphant expression faltered, giving way to confusion and then anger. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded. "I just caught you red-handed stealing my wallet, and you are laughing." I took a deep breath and composed myself, though a smile still played on my lips. "I'm laughing, Belle," I responded, "because that is not my bag and we both know it." I pointed to the designer tote that had sat between our chairs all evening. "That is your bag. You purposefully placed it there, and you put your second wallet inside earlier this evening." Her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about? This is clearly your bag, and my wallet was inside." "Actually," I said calmly, "if you look inside that bag, you'll find it contains items that belong to you, not me. Perhaps your makeup compact with your initials, or that specific brand of hand sanitizer you always carry, or even a small notebook where you jot down perceived slights from family members to discuss later." I'd been paying close attention to Belle for years, taking note of these minor details. The look of shock on her face told me that at least some of my guesses were correct. "You're trying to confuse everyone," Belle insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "The fact remains that my wallet was in this bag next to your chair." "Yes, I agree," I replied. "In your bag, which you carefully positioned to appear as if it might be mine, after I watched you place a second wallet inside it when you returned from the restroom earlier." Gasps and murmurs echoed around the table as the implications finally became clear. My mother's expression shifted from distress to dawning comprehension. My father's went from disappointment to careful consideration. "This is ridiculous, Belle. You're making up stories to cover your theft." "Actually," I replied, "there's a way to settle this definitively." I turned toward the back of the room where Marco, the restaurant's owner, had been quietly watching. "Marco, could you please share what we discussed during the planning of tonight's event?" Marco stepped forward, his professional demeanor tinged with unease. "When Miss Harper was organizing the celebration," he began, "she inquired about our security measures. I informed her that following a theft last year, we installed discrete security cameras in all of our private dining rooms. They are primarily intended to protect our guests' belongings, but they record continuously." Belle's face lost color so rapidly that I thought she might faint. "You knew," she said quietly, looking at me. "You knew there were cameras and you let me—" "I knew there were cameras," I stated. "What I didn't realize was exactly what you were planning. But when I saw you hiding something in that bag, I suspected it was something like this. I just didn't expect you to go so far as to publicly accuse me of theft." Nathan had been listening to this exchange with increasing horror on his face. He stood up abruptly. "Marco, can you show us the security footage right now?" Marco nodded. "Of course, we have immediate access to it in my office." "I don't think that's necessary," Belle interjected quickly, her voice high and tight. "It's gotten out of hand." It was clearly just a misunderstanding. But Nathan was already approaching Marco, his expression grim. I want to see the footage now. I remained seated as Nathan, my father, and Marco exited the room. The atmosphere they left behind was dense with tension. Belle stood rigidly, her hands gripping the back of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. My mother glanced between us, her expression unreadable. Holly had a small, satisfied smile on the corners of her mouth. The minutes stretched on indefinitely. Nobody spoke. The remaining guests fidgeted uncomfortably, clearly wishing to leave, but constrained by social convention. Finally, the door opened and Nathan returned. His face was set in hard lines I'd never seen before, and his eyes were cold as they focused on his wife. The cameras show everything, he explained, his voice flat. They show Belle taking a wallet from her purse, putting it in a tote bag, and placing the bag between the chairs. They show her repeatedly checking to make sure Tessa hadn't noticed, and she is clearly seen removing the wallet during her dramatic accusation. Every eye in the room was drawn to Belle, who now appeared terrified. "Nathan," she said, "I can explain." "Don't," he interrupted her, his voice sharp as a blade. "Please don't. We'll discuss it at home." The silence that ensued was deafening. I'd been waiting years for this moment of vindication, for someone in my family to finally recognize Belle for who she truly was. But now that it had arrived, I felt no triumph, only deep sadness for my brother and my niece. I slowly stood up, drawing all eyes to me. "Mom, Dad," I said softly, "I'm so sorry that this happened during your celebration. This evening was supposed to be about your 41 years of love and commitment. Not any of this." My mother's eyes welled up with tears, but they weren't the ones I'd seen before. "Oh, Tessa," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "We're the ones who should apologize. We should have seen what was going on." As I embraced her, I felt the weight of years of silent pain lift. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally revealed. The remainder of the anniversary dinner took place in a strange, subdued atmosphere. Belle sat rigid in her chair, barely touching her dessert, while Nathan maintained a cold silence. Mia, sensing but not understanding the tension, became increasingly agitated until Holly quietly offered to take her outside for a walk. My parents made a valiant effort to salvage the celebration, thanking guests and reflecting. Their closest friends rallied admirably, creating pockets of genuine warmth amidst the awkwardness. As the evening came to a close and guests began to leave, everyone who approached me did so with a new awareness in their eyes. Some quietly apologized for having doubted me. Others simply squeezed my hand or shoulder, offering silent support. Diane, my mother's best friend, hugged me tightly. "I always knew that woman was trouble," she muttered angrily. "Good for you for standing your ground." My father looked shocked. As he helped my mother with her coat, I noticed him place a protective hand on her back, as if the evening had reminded him of the importance and fragility of family ties. When only my immediate family remained, my father spoke openly about what had occurred. "I owe you an apology, Tessa," he said, his voice full of regret. "We've noticed tension between you and Belle for years, but we dismissed it as typical in-law dynamics. We never imagined it would go this deep." My mother nodded, tears forming again. "We should have protected you better. We were so focused on keeping the peace that we didn't notice who was causing it." "It's not your fault," I assured them, my voice full of emotion. "Belle is extremely skilled at presenting one face to some people and another to others, and I never wanted to force anyone to take sides." Nathan, who had been standing silently near the door, approached us. "I need to talk to you," he told me, his voice rough and emotional. "Alone, if that's okay." We walked out onto the same patio where I had collected myself earlier. The night had grown cooler. Nathan took a long look at the city lights before speaking. "I don't even know where to begin," he finally admitted. "I feel like the world's biggest fool." "You're not a fool," I said softly. "You wanted to believe the best in the person you loved. There's nothing foolish about that." He shook his head sharply. "Stop being so understanding. I don't deserve it. For years, I've dismissed your concerns, defended her actions, and even accused you of being jealous or difficult. And all this time," his tone rang hollow, "all this time, she was deliberately trying to hurt you, to drive a wedge between us." I had imagined this moment of validation countless times, but now that it had arrived, I found no comfort in my brother's pain. "What are you planning to do?" I asked quietly. Nathan ran his hand over his face, looking exhausted. "I don't know. I need to think about Mia and what's best for her. But I know I can't simply pretend this didn't happen. Belle's actions tonight were not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated and cruel. It leaves me wondering what else she's capable of." Before I could respond, the patio door opened and Belle emerged. Her makeup was freshly applied, but it couldn't conceal the redness under her eyes or the tight, defensive set of her mouth. "The car is waiting," she told Nathan, her voice brittle. "Mia is tired." Nathan looked at her for a long time, and I noticed a change in his expression, a hardening that I had not seen before. "Take Mia home," he instructed. "I will take a ride with my parents or Tessa. We need some space tonight." Belle's composure slipped, revealing a moment of panic. "Nathan, please. We need to discuss this." "Yes, we do," he confirmed. "Not tonight. Tonight, I need to process what I saw on the security footage." For a brief moment, I expected Belle to continue her argument, but after a tense silence, she simply nodded and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floors faded as she returned to get Mia. Nathan returned his attention to me after she had left. "I'm so sorry, Tess. I know those words are insufficient, but they're all I have right now." I reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "They are enough for tonight. The rest we'll figure out as we go." When we got back inside, my parents and Holly were waiting. Without Belle's divisive presence, the five of us, our core family unit, stood together in a moment of silent reconnection. Then Holly broke the silence with her characteristic directness. "Well, that was the most dramatic anniversary dinner in history. Congratulations, Mom and Dad. You'll definitely remember this one." Surprisingly, this broke the tension. My father chuckled. My mother smiled through her tears, and even Nathan managed a weak laugh. We gathered our things, thanked Marco profusely for his discretion and help, and made our way out into the night. As we stood on the sidewalk saying our goodbyes, my mother pulled me into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of how you handled yourself tonight," she whispered. "You showed grace under incredible pressure." "I learned from the best," I told her, holding her tight. As I drove home alone later, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The satisfaction of finally having the truth exposed was tempered by concern for my brother and niece. Family dynamics were complicated, and I knew tonight's revelations would have far-reaching consequences. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The constant need to defend myself, to question my own perceptions, to walk on eggshells around Belle. All of it was shifting. The truth had a power of its own, and once revealed, it could not be unseen. In the weeks following that infamous anniversary dinner, our family entered a period of painful but absolutely necessary transformation. The immediate aftermath was exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. Nathan moved into our parents' guest room, explaining to Mia that Daddy needed to help Grandpa with some projects. It was a flimsy excuse that the perceptive 5-year-old clearly didn't fully believe, but it provided a gentle buffer for her. Belle, for her part, cycled through a range of strategies to manage the fallout. First came tearful apologies and claims she had suffered a momentary breakdown due to stress. When those fell on deaf ears, she attempted to minimize her actions, suggesting everyone was overreacting to what was merely a misguided prank. Finally, when those approaches failed, she resorted to what I suspected was her true nature: cold calculation. She hired an expensive divorce attorney and threatened to limit Nathan's access to Mia if he pursued separation. That final move backfired spectacularly. The security footage from the restaurant, which Marco had preserved, provided compelling evidence of Belle's deliberate attempt to frame me and damage my reputation. When Nathan's attorney suggested this demonstrated a pattern of manipulative behavior that might be relevant in custody considerations, Belle's aggressive stance softened considerably. By the 4-month mark after the dinner, Nathan had filed for divorce and moved into his own apartment. He and Belle established a tentative co-parenting arrangement, with Mia spending equal time with both parents. The transition was hardest on Mia. "Aunt Tess," she asked me during one of our outings as we shared ice cream on a park bench, "did Mommy do something bad?" The question caught me off guard, and I chose my words carefully. "Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes in how they treat each other, sweetie. Your mom and dad are working through some grown-up problems, but they both love you very much. That will never change." Mia seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded with the simple acceptance children often show for complex situations. "Daddy's sad a lot now," she observed, "but he smiles more when you visit." My heart ached for her, but also for Nathan. My relationship with my parents also evolved. My father, the lifelong educator, took the situation as a personal failure. "I should have seen what was happening," he told me during a private conversation, his voice heavy with regret. "I observed students and their dynamics for 33 years, but I missed what was right in front of me in my own family." "Dad," I reminded him gently, "Belle fooled a lot of people for a long time. That was her specialty." My mother, ever the nurturer, focused on healing. She instituted weekly family dinners minus Belle, where we gradually relearned how to communicate openly. These gatherings were awkward at first, but over time they became a sanctuary where authentic connection could flourish again. Holly, true to form, approached the situation with characteristic directness. "I've been waiting 7 years to say, 'I told you so,'" she announced to Nathan at one of these dinners. "But now that I can, it doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would." Her honesty somehow broke through some of the tension, and Nathan actually laughed, perhaps his first genuine laugh since that night. As for me, the vindication I had longed for came with unexpected emotional complications. For years, I had channeled my frustration with Belle into my work, using graphic design projects as an outlet for emotions I couldn't express within the family. Now that the truth was known, I found myself at a creative crossroads, unsure where to direct that energy. The initial weeks after the dinner were difficult. I experienced a roller coaster of emotions: relief, anger at the years of gaslighting, guilt over my brother's pain, and anxiety about the future. There were nights I lay awake replaying every interaction with Belle, seeing with new clarity the calculated nature of her behavior from the very beginning. During this period, I sought help from a therapist, Dr. Natalie Reyes, who specialized in family dynamics and emotional recovery. Her guidance was invaluable. "What you experienced was a form of psychological abuse," she explained. "Having your perceptions repeatedly denied or dismissed can make you question your own reality. That's called gaslighting, and recovery takes time." With Dr. Reyes's help, I began to rebuild my sense of self-trust. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away, many of whom had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. I focused on self-care, setting aside time for activities that nourished my spirit, hiking along Lake Michigan, taking a pottery class, reading for pleasure again. Professionally, I channeled my renewed energy into my design business. I'd always been good at my work, but now I found a new level of confidence in my creative vision. I took risks with clients I might have avoided before, proposing bold concepts that pushed boundaries. To my surprise, these were often the ideas that resonated most strongly. Within 8 months, I landed 3 major contracts with national brands and hired my first employee to help manage the increased workload. The most profound healing, however, came through an unexpected channel. About 6 months after the anniversary dinner, I received a message from a woman named Claire who introduced herself as Belle's former college roommate. She had heard about the incident through mutual acquaintances and reached out because, as she put it, "I've been where you are." Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Claire shared her own experiences with Belle during their university years. The patterns were strikingly familiar: the careful cultivation of allies, the subtle undermining, the elaborate setups designed to make Claire appear unstable or unreliable. The conversation was both validating and healing, a confirmation that what I had experienced wasn't isolated or imagined. It took me years to trust my own perceptions again after living with her, Claire confessed. But you know what helped the most? Finding others who had been through similar experiences, knowing I wasn't alone. Inspired by this connection, I started a small, private support group for people recovering from relationships with manipulative individuals. We met monthly, sharing stories and strategies for healing. Through helping others, I found my own path forward, transforming pain into purpose. As the 18-month anniversary of that fateful dinner approached, I reflected on everything that had changed. Nathan was dating again, cautiously a kindergarten teacher he met at one of Mia's school events. My parents seemed lighter, their relationship strengthened by weathering the crisis. Holly had been promoted and was considering a master's degree. And me? I had learned lessons that would shape the rest of my life. I learned the value of patience, of strategic thinking, of waiting for the right moment rather than reacting immediately. I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to manipulation is simply allowing the truth to reveal itself. Most importantly, I learned that standing in your truth, even when others doubt you, is not selfishness but self-preservation. For years, I had silenced myself to keep the peace, believing that harmony required my silence. Now, I understood that real harmony can only exist where truth is honored and respected. The last time I saw Belle was at Mia's 6th birthday party, a carefully orchestrated neutral event at a children's play center. We acknowledged each other with tight nods from across the room, but didn't speak. I noticed she wore a mask of cheerful politeness that never quite reached her eyes, and I wondered if she had already found new targets for her manipulations. But that was no longer my concern. I had reclaimed my voice, my family, and my power. The journey through pain had led to a place of authentic strength, and that perhaps is the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest growth comes through our deepest wounds. The very experiences designed to break us can become the foundation for building a more genuine, powerful version of ourselves. If we have the courage to face them honestly and the wisdom to transform them into something meaningful.